Ever wonder, are you more like your parents than you thought possible? Maybe you've caught yourself laughing the exact same way as your dad, or organizing the pantry like your mum. Weird, right? But is this genetics, childhood programming, or something else entirely? Let's talk about this whole nature versus nurture thing. It's basically the argument over what shapes us more, our genes that's nature or our environment, nurture. Nature says, hey, you got your dad's hairline and your mom's love of lists. Congrats! Nurture's like, nah, you just learned to love lists because you grew up in a house where missing a chore got you the look trademark. In one corner, we've got the geneticists saying, you are who you are because of your DNA, baby. And in the other, we've got psychologists waving a banner that says, environment is everything. So, which side is right? Spoiler alert, it's not that simple. But don't worry, we'll break it down and maybe, just maybe, figure out whether your love of bad puns comes from dad's genes or all those years of pun-heavy dinner conversations. Either way, we're here for it. All right, let's talk about nature, the sciencey side of things. According to Team Nature, a lot of who we are is baked in from the start, straight from the oven of genetics. You know how some people just know they're destined to be great at sports or music, even though they've never touched a basketball or a guitar? Yeah, that's nature working its magic. Turns out, our DNA is packed with information about everything from our eye color to whether we'll love or hate cilantro. Mockingly, sorry cilantro haters, it's in your genes. You didn't choose the anti-cilantro life. The anti-cilantro life chose you. Genes are the blueprint for a lot of what makes you, well, you. Researchers have even found genes that influence personality traits, like how extroverted, anxious, or adventurous you are. So yeah, if you find yourself geeking out over spreadsheets like your dad, it could be because you've both got the same nerd gene working overtime. But here's the thing, genes don't act alone. You could be genetically predisposed to have an artistic streak, but if no one hands you a paintbrush growing up, that little Picasso gene might just stay in hibernation. Genes load the gun, but environment pulls the trigger. Now let's talk about nurture. All the stuff that shapes you from the outside. We're talking about how your parents raised you, what kind of neighborhood you grew up in, who your friends were, and let's be real, how much time you spent watching cartoons after school. The nurture side says that you're like a sponge, soaking up everything around you. Spend your childhood around people who love sports. You might grow up thinking basketball is life, even if you've got 2 left feet. Grew up in a house where sarcasm was the family love language. Think about it. Even your preferences, habits, and weird quirks can be traced back to stuff you picked up from your environment. Like, why do you always have to check if the door is locked 3 times before bed? Is that a genetic thing? Nope. That's probably because your dad made you do it every night growing up, because you can never be too careful. So yeah, nurture plays a huge role in who we are. But wait, don't get too comfortable thinking you're a blank slate, ready to be molded into anything. Genes are still in the background, whispering, psst, remember me? Now here's where things get super interesting. Twin studies. These are like the MVPs of the nature versus nurture debate. Scientists love studying twins because they're like human copies, especially identical twins, who share nearly 100% of their DNA. Why does this matter? Well, if identical twins, who are basically genetic clones, turn out totally different from each other, we can say, aha, environment must have played a big role. But if they turn out eerily similar, even when raised apart, we can give a high five to Team Nature. Studies on twins raised apart have shown that genetics plays a huge role in things like intelligence, temperament, and even some of our weird little habits. But it's not the whole story. Even identical twins can end up with different tastes in music, different hobbies, and different friend groups, showing that environment really does leave its mark. So, nature and nurture, they're more like co-pilots than rivals. One steering the ship, but the other's definitely helping plot the course. Alright, now, let's get into the juicy stuff. Personality genes. You know, the stuff that makes you wonder, am I just a carbon copy of my parents? Well, sort of. Researchers have found that certain personality traits, like how outgoing you are, how much you worry, or whether you're a thrill seeker, are influenced by your genes. So if you're the kind of person who's always the life of the party, You might have inherited that from your mom, who probably charmed her way through every PTA meeting. On the flip side, if you're a bit more, let's say, nervous about trying new things, that might be Dad's anxiety gene making a cameo in your life. Thanks, Dad. But before you start blaming all your quirks on your parents, remember, genes don't decide everything. You might have inherited a shy gene, but if you grew up in an environment that encouraged you to be social and try new things, you could totally outgrow that shyness. It's like your genes gave you the recipe, but your environment decided whether you actually baked the cake. Okay, buckle up, because we're about to get extra science-y with something called epigenetics. Sounds fancy, right? Basically, epigenetics is the study of how your environment can switch certain genes on or off, kind of like flipping a light switch. So while you're born with a set of genes, your lifestyle and experiences can actually affect how those genes express themselves. Wild, right? It's like you've got this genetic playlist, but your environment gets to decide which songs play on repeat. For example, stress can turn on genes that make you more anxious, while a calm, supportive environment might keep those anxiety genes in the off position. So yeah, your genes might load the deck, but nurture is still there, shuffling the cards. This also means that even if you do have a genetic tendency for something, like being super cautious or worrying about everything, you're not stuck with it forever. Your environment can still change things up. That's some pretty good news, right? Hold up, there's another layer to all this. It's not just about your family environment or your DNA. Culture plays a huge role in shaping who we are too. The way you were raised within your culture can influence everything from how you communicate to what values you hold. For example, if you grew up in a culture that values independence, you might be more self-reliant. But if you were raised in a community-focused culture, you're probably super tight with your family and friends, always looking out for each other. Even your approach to problem-solving can be influenced by culture. In some places, people are taught to be super direct, while in others, you learn to read between the lines and be more subtle. So while your genes and your family environment shape a lot of who you are, your culture also leaves a big imprint on your personality. Long story short, there's a lot going into the mix when it comes to who you are, and that's pretty awesome. Okay, time for the big question. Are you more like your parents than you think? Probably, yeah. I mean, if you've ever had that moment where you realize you're using the exact same phrases your mom used to say, or you find yourself organizing your sock drawer just like your dad, congratulations. You're living proof that both nature and nurture are hard at work. But here's the kicker. You're not an exact copy of your parents. You're a blend. You've got their genes, sure, but you've also got your own unique experiences, your own friends, your own choices that make you, you. So yeah, maybe you do have your mom's sense of humor and your dad's love for over-planning vacations down to the minute, but you're also your own person. You've got this awesome mix of DNA, upbringing, and your own life that shapes who you are today. It's kind of like being a custom smoothie, part bananas, part kale, and maybe a little extra sugar just to make things interesting. So, at the end of the day, it's not about picking sides in the nature versus nurture debate. It's about seeing how they work together. Your genes set the stage, but your environment directs the play. You're not doomed to repeat your parents' mistakes, though fair warning, you'll probably pick up a few along the way. And you're not just a product of your environment either. It's a balance, a dance between what you're born with and what you pick up along the way. The cool part? You have control over a lot of your environment, meaning you can shape your future self in ways your genes didn't even see coming. So next time you catch yourself complaining about how you're turning into your parents, just remember, you're more than a sum of their parts. You're the director of your own movie, genes, quirks, and all. Now, speaking of directing your own movie, you're already here, learning how to decode yourself and your family. So, why not take control of your viewing experience too? Hit that subscribe button and join me for more dives into the quirks of human behavior. Trust me, we've got plenty more questions to answer, like why you secretly love complaining and whether your pet knows what you're thinking. You won't want to miss it. Oh, and while you're at it, give that notification bell a little tap. It's like your DNA reminding you to stay curious. Winks. Now, let's keep going. So here's the million-dollar question. What can you actually control when it comes to being more or less like your parents? Well, the truth is, some things are just out of your hands. You can't rewrite your genetic code unless you've got a secret lab somewhere, in which case let me know. But you can control your environment, your choices, and how you react to things. If you don't like something about yourself that you think you got from your parents, don't freak out. Work on it. Take what you've learned about nature and nurture and shape your own path. Your genes might set you up to be a little anxious, but you can learn techniques to manage that anxiety. Your parents might have been total homebodies, but if you crave adventure, you can start planning that cross-country road trip. Your DNA isn't destiny, it's just a suggestion. At the end of the day, you're a mix of a lot of things. Your parents, your environment, your culture, your choices, and that's pretty amazing. Whether you're more like your mom, your dad, or some wild combination of both, you've got the power to shape who you are and who you want to be. So the next time you hear yourself saying something that sounds way too much like your dad, just laugh it off. You're not a carbon copy. You're your own unique recipe. A little nature, a little nurture, and a whole lot of you. And that, my friends, is what makes life so interesting.